So we should start on time, so we have a good turnout here. But hello, everyone. My name is Lexia Bellica, also known as the Wolf Pit Machine, and this is my talk on do-it-yourself zines as a unique and fun and freeing form of fan work. So if you've ever been to one of my panels before, something I'll always do is a very good, delicious disclaimer, but this time we have credentials instead. Yay. I need to promise you that I am a zine guy, a vested, certified zine guy. I've made over 100 zines in a perhaps concerningly short period of time, and tabling at a large number of fests and events, to the point that my friends are very concerned about me in my work ethic and well-being, but you know, I make it work. I do everything I can with great passion, regardless of quality, because it brings joy to me and everyone else. I have also encouraged a number of people to make zines of their own and expand their understanding of what a zine can be. But I've been into fandom and fan work in some capacity for as long as I've used the internet. My longest term fandom is Homestuck, for which I have an ambitious OC webcomic that I've done art, writing, animation, music, and I'm going to do game things for, and I've also made zines about it, both the comic itself and the process of making it. But what are zines? Many people think that they're pronounced zines, and I get that. Before I knew where it was derived from, I did think it was zine, because zine sounds really nice to say, honestly. But it is zine because it comes from the word magazine. And they're just basically non-commercial booklets, kind of like what you would expect from a normal magazine, but it's made on a much smaller scale. Magazines are typically made at a scale where they're trying to prioritize selling ad space so they can make a lot of money off of that, or have very much product placement focused things, and just have a general, less accessible process for selecting their content and like curating what they're doing for the audience they have. But a zine is a much smaller scale. They're typically a lot shorter runs. It depends on the zine and depending on the scale, and sometimes you have zines from larger distributors, or you have zines that are series that come out on a regular basis that have a larger scale and a much longer history, but they're usually made with less like conventional mass production, professional methods to produce them. And most often they're just made by some guy with their printer or sending a small print job to a print shop. But definitely nothing at the scale of major like company-backed magazine productions. And a fanzine is a popular zine type where a lot of zines and fandoms have actually got their start. A lot of fandom can be traced back to major sci-fi fanzines, and that was a really important structure for pre-internet era fandom to connect fans together, because you would have zines that people would contribute to, and you would have mailing lists, and a lot of the zines in the time where it was mostly for amateur writers, usually of sci-fi or genre fiction, would contribute their own original work that was in that genre style and kind of have it more like a literary magazine type, but it was done in an indie production style. But zines from the start have always been more about having a more accessible means of getting people's work out there and connecting creators of all kinds and people that just want to speak on topics they're passionate about. And then fanzines is just anything that is made because you are a fan of something, and that can be because you are a fan of something like a genre, or if you are a fan of like a particular media property. But I'll do more on that later, but zines are also associated with other subcultures and movements, like the literary mag forms that were very big in the Harlem Renaissance, and then you have all the indie comic scenes and punk music scene, and also riot girl activism zines were very popular. But for more on fanzines and shifting idea of fanzines, they were very important in connecting fans in that pre-digital era. But with the internet allowing for you to spread content that is more accessible and also sometimes free, because you don't have to worry about costs associated with paper and the labor putting things together, and ink cost, of course. You were able to get things out there like your fan work about your writing, or just anything that you might make a zine for otherwise, and have to do all these logistical issues involved in getting your stuff out there. You could just do something with a website, have a fan site, and get things out there without having all of these like material. You have to pay for like hosting and whatnot, but it was a less like defined barriers to get into. And the idea of fanzines, though, in modern fandom are most often these professional level art zines that are like either completely art books or they're art fan fiction like combos. And a lot of these projects end up having Kickstarter campaigns where a lot of people will contribute. And most of the time, though, it's not as much for profit, as a lot of these funds are used to fund not only additional merch rewards, but also there's a lot of those big projects will donate most of their profits to charities. And there's nothing bad about fanzines at this scale. I just think that having the association with fanzines be these major projects that feel so untouchable that you don't think some people think that they can't make something that they could call a zine because it seems like these really fancy things that are all put together they might not have the skills to, and those are still zines, but you can make so much more than that just yourself, and you don't need anything to do it. But where to find zines? If you're just interested in zines in general, if it's your first exposure to them as like something other than this thing you might heard of, you can find more and more often artists in con artist alleys having art zines or like smaller zine projects. I was specifically hunting for some around Hallmat yesterday that I have a couple that I'll talk about later. But there's also other places you can find zines, like at specific zine fests or other local print fests. You can also, if you're lucky, find zine libraries local to you that have a lot of zines that you can go, that you can read through, and you can get involved in local zine scenes. And you can also find a number of them free or paid online in digital format or for order through sites like Itch and just other social media platforms. And if you want zine inspiration, do look outside fanzines, even if you're trying to make a fanzine, because you can find other types and formats that might really align with your interests, and you can adapt any kind of fan work into a zine format with just enough creativity. I also included a list of a bunch of Florida zine fests if you're local to Florida. A lot of them are in March, unfortunately, and that makes me very, very busy around that time, but I do it anyways because it's so fun to be involved. But what goes into a do-it-yourself fanzine? And we can talk more about this after I talk about the things you can do and how you can make zines and the different formats there are. But there really are no rules to making a zine. Your zine does not have to look like any zine that has ever existed before it or will exist after it. But some ideas that you can do for a fanzine, you can do just a meta-analysis of your fandom story or just any kind of thing talking about those type of things. You can basically turn something you might have made as a Tumblr post or just a blog article into a zine. You can also do things that are more personal experience. Perzines, personal zines are a very popular format of zine that you can take a fanzine lean on by having it be just about your experience of being a fan. A lot of people have really long histories and deeply impactful personal experiences associated with different fandoms, and there are unique experiences that are felt from just being a fan of specific fandoms or just experiencing it in general. That can be a very interesting subject to make a zine about. You can also do things that are more of like essay style, like actually analyzing and talking about the thing as if you would to writing a normal essay but having fun with it. You can even adapt like existing other types of fan work. You can kind of use it as your form of, instead of like doing all the steps to do a full book binding of a fanfic, you can make a mini zine version. You can adapt it, change it, just kind of have it in that form. Or comics. You can also do rec lists or reviews of fan works. You can do writing guides for anyone who wants to make their own fan work or do role play. You could talk about your wildly unpopular opinions in a way that's highly persuasive to make sure that everyone knows that you're absolutely right. You've never been wrong in your entire life. One of my favorite forms is having it be a pitch, an ad essentially on why someone should get into the source material or your fandom, which is also great because you can inject your personal opinions to prime them to agree with you once they do get into it. You can also do celebrations of your favorite characters. Many of us have a favorite guy that we just kind of want to just put in there in some paper and just trap them in there and just look at forever after. Or just top moments, or just anything you could do, anything that you could do in writing or visual form, you can make it into a little zine, and it's extra awesome because it's a physical little thing you can pick up in your hands and flip around that takes up space, that is proof that you did something with your time. So what do I need? What does anyone need to make their own fanzine? Passion. For many things. Graphic design, of course, can be one thing if you want to do that, but passion is the key to everything, but unfortunately that's not very helpful in itself. You don't need anything though to be real, but that doesn't help you understand what you can do with what you have or what you want to learn. It is very freeing to be like, there's no rules, you can do anything you want, but sometimes you're like, well, what if I kind of like rules? What if I kind of like knowing what I can do or what exists out there, what the options are, so I can get a little bit mischievous breaking those rules? So let's just talk about things you can do with zine making. There's a lot of history of people experimenting with zines, failing with zines, doing all these different kinds of zines, and knowing the way that people make their zines will kind of give you ideas of how you can do things on your own. But again, you don't need specific skills to make zines. Some people feel like, I can't make zines because I don't know anything about visual art. I can't draw, I can't edit things together. But you don't have to do that. You can make entirely text-based zines that will find their own audience. I started making primarily very word-heavy zines and sometimes with barely complicated covers at all. And I have a lot of people who really enjoy those zines. Because of just the writing that's in there, because you can get writing out there that would be much harder to compile in a format like that in any other way. And then also, but one thing to note is, like, you're thinking about the formats, things you can do, having as narrow of a concept as possible or specific as a concept as possible for your zine will really help. And just know that when you make your own zine, just as one person, it's super low stakes and you usually don't have to invest that much ever, only if you want to. So you can really be as wild and experimental as you want. You are the only person that will limit yourself. So yourself is your enemy, but also your greatest ally. Do with that what you will. Sometimes it'll help, sometimes it won't, but at least you know you can blame yourself, but also empower yourself. It can be really weird. You have to do mental hurdles to do zines, but I think it's really fun. And there are also no required materials for making a zine. Some things will help though, depending on your method, and you also don't even need your own printer or scanner to do zines and make copies, as you can always just do purely digital ones, or a one-off physical zine. You can make one just with paper and art supplies and kind of have it as something you're never gonna make copies of or print out of, or you can send it off somewhere else to get printed if you want to do that. But some very standard basic materials, paper of course, scissors, because a lot of the different, like the main format of just like an easily accessible zine does require scissors for its binding, that I'll talk about in a second. But other ones may also require a stapler or some other way to bind things, and writing utensils are obviously helpful if you're going to be doing a more traditional format for making your zine. But other more specialized material is this something that's called a bone folder, which looks like that thing up there. It's not actually made of bone these days, it's more like a plastic, but it's really like smooth and interestingly shaped that you use to crease folds when you're folding something. I was always astonished at how anyone can fold paper good, and I'll be honest, I still can't fold things good. All my zines are really folded wonky, but I think it adds to the charm. At least it's how I cope with the fates of what my zines look like. But you can at least make those folds flat and crease with this thing, and if you don't have it, you can use your fingernail or sometimes a credit card, but that makes me nervous for some reason. Other things that help is a long arm stapler, which is just a long stapler that helps you if you have bigger pages that a smaller stapler won't reach. A paper cutter is super helpful if you want to do images that go off the page, so you can kind of cut it down if you don't have a printer that prints all the way to the edge. An awl where you can just poke holes through the paper so you can sew it up if your stapler is not handling it or you want something much fancier. And then art supplies, craft knives for cutting, tape, there's a lot of things you can do with it, but those are the main other like specialer tools and the basics that you can use that I think are helpful. Like some printing basics. So you can do like fully digital zines as PDFs or web pages, and you don't have to worry about any print things. But if you have any idea that you might want to print it in the future or have copies in the future, there are some things that are helpful to keep in mind. Paper dimensions and the ratio was important, because if you only have a printer that can print the standard 8.5 by 11 size, and you're using a template, there's a lot of templates out that are helpful, make sure that your template is actually size 8.5 by 11 or the same ratio. Because I realized months into my zine making that I was using a template that was meant for, I think, legal size paper, which is not the right ratio. And I was just wondering, of like, why is this printing with all this like space on the top and the bottom of my pages of my zine? Because I was just using the wrong size paper, like it's the template for it, and it was not for the paper I had. So a lot of my zines look wonky, and I still need to fix some of them, but I might not fix them because people still like them anyways. I don't know. You can get away with a lot of things with zines that aren't like super refined, and I think that's fraying. But also image resolution is very important. There's a lot of confusing things about image resolution that I don't like to think about beyond what I know to make things look not garbage and super blurry. The main thing that I just remember is that minimum 300 DPI, you don't got to worry about what that means as long as you see it somewhere, is your best bet for printing, because most stuff, if you save a picture on the web, is like 72 or like 90 something, but usually 72. And if you try to print that out sometimes, it's gonna look a little blurry. And sometimes that might be fine. We're not trying to do something super fancy. Most of the time your printer's not gonna be like super good on its own and things are gonna come out blurry anyways, but if you can reduce the blur if you don't want it, maybe that's helpful. For zines, you gotta have the page count divisible by 4, because I'll explain more with a visual for this, but when you print out your pages, like if you're doing just a half letter where it's a normal sheet of paper folded in half, you've got, if you're doing like the front cover, for example, like the front cover you have on one side, you have the front cover, the back cover, and you flip it around, you have page 1, and then the second, like the last page before the back cover. So like you have to kind of form in a way where you have the 4 pages, and then you got 2 on each side, and it can be really confusing, but I recommend making paper mock-ups and numbering them just so you can figure out what's going on, because it's very hard to visualize that in your head, and you will confuse yourself deeply. Bleed, which is the thing I talked about earlier, where if you have pictures or visuals that are going off the edge of the paper, most printers don't do borderless, and if they do, they're probably going to use a lot of ink, and that's going to be very expensive and hurtful for you. So you can print things and have marks where you cut it down so it's smaller than the size of what you printed it on, but things still kind of go off the edge really nicely and pretty. Ink cost is important because it is typically much more expensive to print in color, especially if you're getting it ordered somewhere. I have a printer that's got like the tanks that you fill up that I can print so much. It feels like almost illegal how much I can print and get away with before I have to refill those ink things, and it's not that expensive to refill it anyway. So like I feel like I'm on top of the world, and I've been doing extra color zines because of it, because it feels like I'm running out of the black so much more, and it's just like I can do so much stuff, especially because printing color on colorful paper looks so awesome, and I want to do more of that. Quality needs is also something that's important depending on the kind of zine you're doing. Because some paper, if you try to print a lot of ink on it, a lot of coverage, that thing's going to fall apart, and at worst it's going to jam your printer and just get stuff everywhere. I have certain pages in some of my zines that I'm not going to change because I don't know what's causing the problem, but my printer just loves to spurt black ink on the corners of it and just all over, and it just like has a personal problem with it, and it'll just do things. It probably is because of the ink coverage, but sometimes you just don't know. Printers have a mind of their own. They're like wild horses that you cannot predict ever in your life. But it is important to know that if you're doing stuff that's more like you're worried about the quality of the colors and having a lot of the ink coverage, you might want to have paper that's more geared towards photo and color, depending on how much you care about how it looks and how it holds up. And there's also like, it might not last as long if you use certain kinds of paper, but it all depends on what you're looking for. If you're just trying to make like a fanzine, you're not expecting to last forever, because none of your art has to last forever. Nothing has to last a test of the time. Some of my really silly bit zines, those don't gotta last like 20 years. They gotta last at least maybe a year if most, but like they just exist for the moment, and they're beautiful short little lifespan, and I treasure them while they're there. Binding is also important to know because there's different ways you can do it, and I'll talk about some of the other methods, but you do want to be careful where if you're making a zine that has going to have a lot of pages in it and it's going to be long, and you don't want to sew that thing by hand, and you don't have a stapler that can handle it, just think about these things. You will be signing yourself up for maybe binding methods you don't want to do if you do commit to that format. But let's talk about the classic. The classic is the one-sheet mini-zine. You got a single sheet of paper, and you fold it into 8 little pages, and you do this really complicated, to me, complicated cutting maneuver that I struggled really hard trying to draw this diagram where you cut and then push in until it turns itself into a book. It does feel like magic every single time I do it. Even if I got it like in an autopilot science by now, I don't know what's happening with it, but like it works and it's amazing and it's an easy format to do and you can do so much with it. It's a classic, and it does not require any staples or extra binding. Really, all you do is you just need the paper and you need scissors to make the cut in the middle part of it to make that booklet. I do really recommend looking up a video demonstration of it. There are a lot of charts out there, but I find that none of them kind of really communicate the folding thing that you're doing, pushing it in that well. I only really feel like I understand what it's communicating because I've done it before and I've seen people do it in front of me and in videos. But you can find templates for this in pretty much any digital program if you want to put together your zine digitally. You can find it with all the like the page numbers you have on there, and then where you cut and where you fold. There's a lot of really accessible formats for this template. Just be sure that you are using the size that you are going to be printing on, because if you're doing one that is for your standard 8.5 by 11 letter paper, each of your little pages are going to be 2.75 inches by 4.25 inches, and that's kind of the space you're working with. The half letter and more, where it's like the one I was talking about, where you're folding these sheets together and you got them printed front and back. This is really important that if you're doing this yourself, do make a mock-up to understand where things are going, especially if you're going to be doing the any kind of like traditional art or like physical copy as your master copy that you want to actually fold together. Because if you do the art and the design for it on sheets of paper where like that one sheet of paper has like the pages that are supposed to go next to each other in the spread, you're not going to put that together. You can scan that and then you print it, you can put it together, but it's not going to be, you can't put it together as it is. And it's when you do have it though, where you are making it how it's going to look, or you have like your PDF version and you just need to find the way to format it so you can print it and make it to that booklet. There are online tools that you can use to convert your PDFs into a printable format. If your program that you're using doesn't have something where you can export it that way as is. And this is also where it's important to keep in mind the image bleed thing, talking about how many printers can't do the borderless, and you need to make sure that everything is formatted the way that you need it to, so you can either cut it down or make changes. And hopefully sometimes printers, if you do put things in the exact center and you want things to print in the exact center, front and back, it like understands that's what you want, but it won't do it sometimes. You just gotta hope it'll do it, but not always. So binding zines. This depends a lot on paper thickness. I can feel like I can easily, with a non-heavy duty stapler, bind 12 sheets of the 24-pound copy paper, which is just like the slightly thicker, slightly fancier copy paper, with no problem. You can probably do more with a heavy duty stapler, but if you have too many pages, and even if it does staple, you might not want to do that anyways, because it can fold weird or it can bend weird or just look off in general. But if you end up having too many pages, or you want to do a hand sewn binding just for your own self, you can do a pamphlets or saddle stitch. I recommend looking up. I have to look up online every single time a video on how to do it, because I don't remember where the holes go and how to do it. I just think that it's one of those spatial things that I'm just like, it gets deleted from my brain every single time I try to relearn it and do it, no matter how many times I've done it. But there are other fun binding methods that can just add a little bit of unique flair and funness to your zines. Like you can do the classic format. You can use a safety pin. I've seen people just stick an actual safety pin instead of a staple, and it's just got this little thing sticking out there, hanging out, just adding to the flair of it. Or just anything else that you can do to just kind of keep the pages together in any way that works. So some paper notes. I think that the normal like 20-pound thin copy paper is not gonna be enough for any zine that you do where you're doing front and back. Which is unfortunate, because a lot of pastel color paper is almost always 20-pound. It's very hard to find ones that are thicker than that, and it hurts me. But as long as you're not doing front and back printing, it might not be a problem, but it's also not really sturdy anyways. So I would really stick with the 24-pound. Though paper's really weird because pound doesn't always mean the same thing, because you got different types of paper that are like the cover paper or the text paper. I don't remember the specific words, but it doesn't always mean the same thing because it wants to trick you and hurt you, and I don't know why. So GSM is sometimes a more reliable thing, so just look for 90 GSM. But no, if you're doing thicker paper for covers, which I think is a good idea for a lot of zines, it's going to have a lot more in it, or you just want something a little fancier, just be aware if you're printing at home what your printer can handle, because it might not like you if you try to print certain things in it, or if you try to print too much of a certain thing. Just be kind to your printer because it's doing you a lot of favors, and it might die on you at the wrong time if you do not think kind thoughts about it. It's probably not true, but I like to think that way because I think it's fun. But yeah, thick cover might be also good, and also having colorful copy paper is a great way to get color in your zines, especially if you can't afford doing full color printing. And it's also great for having little colorful minis. I think though, and I've been tabling at Zine Fest, something that's been a big draw to my table is having all these little colorful pieces of paper. People cannot resist seeing a riot of colors in a little shelf. They just like go wild for it, and it's a beautiful sight to behold. And as I said before, if you've got a lot of images, if you've got photo, if you've got art, having some paper that's specifically meant for that kind of thing is going to be ideal, because you'll just be able to make everything look so much sharper and so much more accurate to the colors that you designed it with. So how can I actually start making zines and actually finish them? Because it's so easy to start things sometimes, but finishing them, that's another beast. So, and like I said before, when there are no rules, you can sometimes get really intimidated by just all the options. And you can feel really lost. Either you just are stuck in the idea stage, you just have too many ideas or too little ideas and you don't know how to translate them, or it's just the whole task of working that idea to completion, to getting there. And I do feel like generally if you're really lost, kind of narrowing things down on like your topic or your angle does really help, unless you want to do the thing where it's just like, I got these pages, I got a love of this thing that I need to talk about. I'm just going to do whatever I can to fill all these pages, and maybe we won't have a really neat conclusion, but we're going to get there. It's how I wrote most of my English major essays, and I got a lot of good grades on them. But as fan work, just know that if you're making a fanzine, of course, it should be a testament to your fanish investment in the thing that it's about. Again, passion is important. You are doing this because you love this thing, and you're doing it because you enjoy the thing. You're not going to make it big and rich and power off of making zines. You are doing it for the love of the thing or your favorite guy, and you do it for yourself. So also take that and that love and apply it to yourself and have manageable expectations for the end result. I would honestly prioritize finishing it with the most comfortable amount of effort you want to put in, because you can always make it better later. You can always make new versions of it. You can change it to any point you want. Yes, if you give copies away before you're at a satisfying state that you wish it could have been in from the start, that's fine, because it's not like you make a zine and that's like someone's impression of you and your work and your opinions forever. You can change things often. If someone thinks that entirely has an opinion of you based on your one zine in that moment that wasn't great, then they're just weird. That's their problem. That's on them. That's a scale issue. So just worry very little about quality and arbitrary standards of anything, and just do it for you. But I understand it's not hard, and sometimes you kind of want to worry a little bit. But what if no one cares? What if no one cares about my fanzine or talking about my really strong opinions on these things that I know and I love, that I don't know if people are actually listening to me, if their eyes are glazing over when I talk about it, which is actually honestly impossible, because I, for one, will care if someone makes something because of this panel or because of any of my work that is something that keeps me going all the time. But do it because you care. And it's inevitable that someone else will care too, because you cared. You dared to have passion in this time and do something and communicate it to people, and that is a very vulnerable and very beautiful thing for you to do. Whatever you can make in any form is unique, because no one else could have made it other than you. You don't need to be an artist. You don't need to be a writer. You don't need to be a designer. You don't even need to be creative. You need only care. Perfectionism is a curse, a word that will never be truly won. And sometimes I'm swinging with its allies, though. I get it. It can be hard. It can be more complicated than that. Sometimes it's usually never just being a perfectionist. You're going to have battles with low energy. You might have depression. You might have all these other obligations in your life and things you need to do. You might feel like you have no ideas, and you might not just have enough time, whether you really don't have time or you just think you don't have time, because sometimes you can't understand time. And you might not be able to kill the perfectionism in you every time it tries to sway you. But every time that you make anything, you are so much better, maybe not in skills, but in achieving the act of creation. And every time that you are struggling, you can look at the things that you've made before, if you've made things before, and be like, I did it once, why can't I do it again? Maybe it'll look different, maybe it'll be different, because I'm a different person at this time, and that's fine. And do you have passion or love? Do you want to do something about it? And if that is true, make bad art. Never forget, make bad art and make bad fan work. You don't have to make good things, and you don't even have to make things in hopes of eventually making good things. You can make things for the sake of making them, and zines, let alone fanzines, with their highly limited prospects for profit, should really be setting you free. So kill the part of you that cringes. You need to make something, and nothing has to be good to deserve to exist, ever. And nothing has to be good to deserve to exist. It can just exist and be good in that way. So let's talk about what fanzines can I do. So we talk all those beautiful thoughts, but it's like, yeah, that's so beautiful. I feel so inspired right now. I'm going to remember this forever and have to remind myself of it constantly. But what can I actually do? Ideas, like, I feel like no one ever truly has no ideas. You might have blocks that makes it hard to see. There's the fog in the brain. It's hard, everything's so blurry. But they're there, but just like, well, how can I do things with them? And again, yeah, the sky's the limit, and that's a beautiful thought, but sometimes that's not helpful. But if you know the zine format, you know what zines can look like, you've seen zines before, you might find ideas for zines that way. And they can have such a loose definition too, as a lot of fan work and art does. And I feel like, and I like to be very semantically fast and loose with things, that if you say something is art or a zine with enough confidence, like, who's going to tell you no? Who's going to stop you? Like, that's weird if they try to stop you. Like, what's your agenda and motivation in stopping you? Like, if I'm confident enough and if you're loud enough about it, then that's a zine, and you hopefully had fun making it and joy put into it and your passion put into it. And it's also, if it's about something that you're a fan of, then it is definitely a fanzine. And you've officially made a fanzine, and you're now part of a wider zine scene, whether you can see it or not, and out of this beautiful, eager part of fandom that is ready to accept you into their ranks. And you can also just make zines about associated things. I make so many zines about having OCs, specifically fan OCs of something, and that ends up being a fanzine in its own right that creates a wonderful world, because when you make things and you tell people about things, they might care about them, and then you feel like you've pulled a mastermind trick, tricking people to care about the guys that only exist in your head because you've made them real by telling people about it. Because it's always the big scam about, like, I have all these passions and love of these stories in my head, but I've never told anyone about it, so they're only in there and I don't know what to do with it. Well, you can make a zine about it, and people will care about it because they'll think it's so impressive, you've got this little thing. So I'm gonna give you an example of some zines. So this is actually my first fanzine that I made about Pathologic 2. I made this very, very early on in my love of zines and making things as a supplement to a PowerPoint party at my beloved friend's wedding. Which also led to some rattler. We don't have time for that. The presentation was on the Pathologic games. It was mostly about Classic, but I did have this bit at the end about why people should play Pathologic 2, which is a reimagining of the first game that's a lot more accessible, and I had tips on how to make it through the experience. So it really was one of those pitch for the game type of zines that has done surprisingly really well at Zine Fest, with some really unexpected people picking it up, as well as a lot of people who either wanted to get into the game for a really long time, but they're put off about how depressing and really hard it is and how it challenges the notion of games needing to be fun. Or they have friends that they've been bullying for years and years to play the games and they haven't, and I'm like, maybe this little piece of paper will make you do it. And here's just an example of what the zine itself looks like. It's a little taste, and this is a mini zine format where I would fold it out and I would cut it in the middle there to kind of have it in its form. I unfortunately printed this for the first time for the presentation on my photo printer, and it used half of the ink that I had, and it was really sad, but it was nice to have this thing and give out for my presentation. But I have other examples. So yesterday I picked up fanzines from two artists that are right here at Hall Mat. So if you think they're interesting, you can go and find their tables. And I chatted with the artist about their work and the zines that they had, and they both gave me permission to show their fanzines and examples, and I have them up here if anyone wants to look at them afterwards. So the first one was a Borderlands 2 fanzine about from the point of view of the character of Handsome Jack, where I thought was really interesting because it was framed as something that would be useful as like a cosplay prop, as like a recruitment ad to be like body doubles. And had this really fun like character tone of voice in it that just like I think it's very fun and whimsical, because I think it's always super fun to like make art or make things from the perspective of characters, because I always like to think about like how would my characters like draw things, would they be lazy about, what would their writing styles be, because I know how they talk and stuff, but like what kind of art would they make and how would it be different from my own, and how can I make things that look like they're not from me. And I think it's a super interesting experience. And it just shows how you can kind of do these different things to like express these characters or these concepts in different unconventional ways. And the artists also at their table had a lot of other zines about their OCs and about Borderlands and art, and like these DIY zine workbooks where you can kind of like fill things in about like your own guides and things as you work through things. So I highly recommend checking out their table. And the other one's an example of like a smaller form project of like an art scene type of thing, where it's kind of got a lot of the art scene trappings, but it's like, I feel like I could just describe it as like a vibes piece. It's an artsy pamphlet that kind of has all this like style of like these really abstract, beautiful colors, and this really hypnotic writing that kind of really beautifully captures the vibe of the game Disco Elysium. That I think it just kind of puts me back in how it felt to be in that place. Yeah, I see someone's got it right there. And I think it's also just like an example of like, say it's one of those more of the artsy ones, but like you don't have to do a big collab putting things together, and you don't have to make a super long thing. So it's a relatively short pamphlet, but I just think it's this beautiful little physical thing that's just so unique to kind of have in this form that just feels really special. And just, there's something about just those little beautiful, colorful booklets that you would normally not find in anything else, because it's not the kind of thing that you find in like a big book anthology of like comics and stuff. It'd be hard to have something like this in like a print form. I just think it's something really special at having this tiny little thing that's just packed with just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And the artist also at their table has some amazing other fan comics and art books also available in their wonderful, vivid style. I highly recommend checking them out. So you gotta ask sometimes, I finished my fanzine, so like, what do I do? There's a lot of things you can do. The examples I have here are ones that I make as Patreon rewards for my Homestuck podcast, so I'm the kind of guy that does that. But you have a lot of options. You can give copies to your friends and prove how right you are about your opinions, or why they should totally like the things that you like, and like you can talk about it and like bond over that, and the things would be so much more awesome if you all like these things. Or you can trade your zines with Zinesters online at cons. And at events in your community and other things. I do really love, even if I'm not tabling at an event, having zines with me. I constantly forget, but I love being able to have things where like if I talk with someone, they're really into something I'm into, they have similar ideas, just kind of like giving them one of my zines. Because it's just like, here's a little thing for you. It's got my words and my arts and stuff in there, my thoughts in there, just like a zine. A little gift, a little thank you for being awesome and wonderful. You can also share your work online. It's not as scary as one might think. You can just put things out there. They just let anybody post things on there. They let anybody do anything. So you can just do anything. You can put it out there. And if someone complains, honestly, it's their problem, especially if you're putting something free out there that you put a lot of effort and passion into. Just like, come on, be cool about it. It's fine. But you can also, if you're lucky, find zine libraries and collections that you can put copies of your zines in. And if you make a bunch of fanzines and other zines, you can apply to local Zine Fest. Zine Fest have very low barriers of entry, honestly, and are very welcome to new zinesters. But yeah, that's all that I have. This is my info, everything. And any questions?